Hey, kiddos. So we're going to read chapter 4 today. I hope you guys are actually listening to these videos. I haven't really checked to see if anyone's signing in, but I should. But I hope you're watching them. I hope you miss me as much as I miss you. It's Wednesday of spring break. I just got out of the shower, so long wet hair. You guys don't usually get to see me with long wet hair. 2 more days till we finish buying our house. So exciting days coming. You might hear my boys in the background screaming and hollering. They're outside playing. Okay, so chapter 4. Clamming. The children walked through the beach grass and sat on the sand. Jessie, look at that, cried Benny, pointing. As he spoke, a stream of water shot out of the sand, but Henry did not stop to say how pretty it was. Clams, he shouted. He jumped up and took a stick from the beach. The rest of the children and the dog ran to watch Henry as he began to dig. Sure enough, he took a real clam from the wet hole. Oh, I wish I had a shovel, cried Henry. There are lots of clams in that hole and that. Let's run up and get 2 big spoons and a dishpan, cried Jessie. They raced for the tools, leaving Benny and Violet with the stick. When they came running back, they found that Benny had dug out another clam. I'm going to keep mine, said Benny, very pleased with himself. It is such a pretty purple color. You can put all yours together into this pan, Benny, said Jessie, giving him a saucepan. You don't want to keep them when you find out how good they are to eat. The children took off their shoes and set to work. There's another, cried Benny. I can't dig fast enough. Watch seemed to know what was going on. He stood still for a minute. Hold on, I'm going to move this. My little webcam is in the way. What is that? Oop, that flips me. And that makes me big. Okay, I'm just going to close it. He stood still for a minute watching Benny dig with the stick. Then he began to dig too with his paws. Good old Watch, cried Benny. You can do all my digging if you want, and I will take the clams out for you. As if he really did understand. Sorry. The dog waited. For Benny to show him where the clam was. Then he began to dig again. The older children laughed to see the sand fly under his paws. So the sand was flying. They were very glad to see the pan fill up. I need my water. I suppose these are for dinner tomorrow, said Henry, as he threw a clam in the pile. Yes, said Jessie. These will keep all right here. We can cover them all over with seaweed. I think we have enough, said Henry, looking at the pan. Then he went to the water and pulled out a lot of wet seaweed. He spread this carefully over the clams. I wish we knew what was around the next point, he said. Let's find out. We're exploring now, Benny, said Violet. You must keep your eyes open. Benny's eyes were certainly open when he went around the point. In the water near the beach was a little raft. Oh, I know that Grandfather fixed this place for us to swim in, said Benny. Of course he did, said Henry. The water here can't be over my head, but it is deep enough for swimming. Yes, said Jessie. Oops. The children explored until 3 o'clock. Then they all agreed to go swimming and went to their rooms to put on their suits. When they came back to the beach, they all walked together into the water. Cold, said Benny, walking out again. I like warm water. That's because you're not in all over, said Jessie, laughing. You just watch Henry, and soon you'll like it. They all watched Henry as he went quickly into the water and began swimming hand over hand to the raft. Watch swam along beside him. It's great, Henry shouted as he sat on the raft. Come on out, Jessie. I will, just as soon as I get Benny in, she called back. You'll never be warm unless you go in all over, Benny. But Benny would not go in. He sat in his swimming suit, throwing stones into the water. Violet was down the beach looking for seaweed. She said she'd stay with Benny while Jessie swam out to the raft. As Jessie and Henry sat with their feet in the water, they saw a man coming. "It's Joe!" cried Henry. It was Joe, and he was wearing a swimming suit. Henry watched as Joe came along the beach and sat down beside Benny. "How is the water today?" asked Joe. "It's awfully cold," replied Benny. "It's ice melted." "I guess that's because you haven't been in all over," said Joe, smiling. "Yeah, that's what Jessie says," said Benny. "That is called rockweed," said Joe suddenly, as Violet picked up a long piece of brown seaweed. "There are beautiful seaweeds around here. See this dark green one on the sand? And here's another red one. Look, there's a piece of it in that wave." Joe went into the water and Violet followed him. "Oh, there it goes," she cried. "We've lost it." Benny was standing up by this time looking into the waves. He did not even feel the water splashing over his feet. The seaweed came up on a wave and went down again. This time, Benny went right after it. "I've got it," he shouted. He was right. He'd caught the red seaweed, and he was wet all over. "Good for you, Benny," said Joe with a smile. "Let me take it a minute." "Here," said Benny, handing the seaweed to Joe. He did not know that he was standing in melted ice. "Say, I have an idea," said Joe. "Float the seaweed like this in water, then pick it up by putting a piece of writing paper under it, and spread out the feathery branches with a pen." "Will the seaweed stay on the paper?" asked Violet. "Yes," said Joe. "There is something in the seaweed that makes it stick to the paper when it's dry. Then you can use the paper for writing letters." "Oh, I'd like that," cried Violet. "But I'd also like to make a seaweed collection." "Fine," said Henry, for he and Jessie had come back from the raft to see what was going on. "You can write down the names of the seaweed and make a little book." "That will be hard to do. There aren't many everyday names for seaweed," said Joe. "You know lots of things, don't you, Joe?" said Benny. The three older children agreed, for they had seen how clever Joe had been in getting Benny into the cold water without his knowing it. After they had dressed and were sitting down to supper, Henry was thinking about Joe. Later, when he was in bed, he thought, Joe was a very strange handyman. Handy. To know the names of all the different kinds of seaweed. Well, that was a short chapter. All right, so chapter 5, summer plan, will be for tomorrow. I love you guys. I miss you.